Alright gang, we're at the range. We had the rare opportunity to shoot the new Gen 5 Glock 19 and 17. Pretty cool. Reminds me a lot of the 17 19Ms that people have been seeing photos of on the internet. The magazine is one of the first things a little bit different. It's got a slightly more angled part on the floor plate here. The follower is now high visibility orange. It reminds me a lot of the new Magpul ones that came out a little bit ago. And it's very high visibility once you've got cartridges in the magazine. That orange part shows up in the back. Give you a good rough estimate of how much ammo is in that mag very easily. The magazine well of the pistol is nicely beveled. It's got kind of a nice deep caverning here. It kind of flares out to the sides, as you might be able to see. There's also a magazine removal cutout here up in the front, kind of like the older Gen 1, Gen 2 Glocks, where if you had a magazine that was stuck inside the magazine well and you needed to remove it, you could reach your finger in, you could grab it and really pull the magazine out of the gun very well. So that's a neat little addition, sort of a cool throwback. Moving upward the gun, of course we still have this area where we can add the different back straps. Comes from the Gen 4s as well. The most important part, boom, no finger grooves. I prefer being able to put my hands where I want to put them instead of where an engineer decided I was supposed to. So I love having that front strap plain like that. Then they've also done a little bit more of an undercut, and they've beveled the edges right here where the trigger guard meets the frame, which is really cool. So some people get the Glock knuckle where it rubs into them really aggressively there. I think this is going to be a little bit easier for a lot of people to hold on to. It still has the Gen 4 style magazine release where it's reversible from one side to the other, and it feels like it's just a little tiny bit extended. As you can see from that side of the frame there, we've got an ambidextrous slide lock lever, which is pretty cool. So if you're a southpaw and you want to use your shooting hands to lock the action open or drop the slide, you can now do so very easily, which is pretty cool. They've also changed the shape of the slide lock. It extends just a little bit further out and it angles downward. It's kind of hard to see from this camera angle, but it feels really good. It's very easy to get your thumb up underneath it to lock the action to the rear. So it's just a little bit more user-friendly than the previous ones on the earlier Gen 4, Gen 3, etc. Glocks. Now the trigger itself is smooth. This is the 19. Of course, the 17 also has the smooth trigger. And previously, the Glock 19s had this serrated face on the trigger, which some people didn't like. This is the same trigger in both of the guns that we've seen, nice and smooth. And they've also changed the way some of the internals get together. And as a result, it's a very crisp trigger. They've improved it a little bit in a few subtle ways that make it much nicer. So it's a very clean break, feels relatively light. And then the reset is even shorter and just as tactile as it always was. So very nice improvements to the trigger there. I think it's in the running for one of the nicer out-of-the-box striker fire triggers in the market. Moving up, we've got the slide here. They've done a couple things differently with this. They've beveled the front angles of the slide. So maybe if you're reholstering in a hurry or something, it's a little bit easier to do so. Kind of like the Glock 34 and the Glock 26, which is kind of cool. And they've also used a new finish. It's supposed to be a more durable finish. It's a much richer, darker black than like the Gen 4 guns and the Gen 3s sort of later in their production cycle, whereas that sort of slate gray. There's a similar sort of smooth texture, but it's a much richer, darker color. It kind of reminds me of the old Tennifer, but without that sort of sandpapery sort of feel to it. I'm told that they've also changed the way they've rifled the barrels, and it does have a recessed sort of target style crown on there. The sights are what feel to be a stronger plastic. They're not metal, but they feel much more durable. The factory Glock sights that were OEM on the guns previously, you could take your fingernail and carve up, and these have not yet done that when I've tried it. They've also changed the physical shape of the rear sight a little bit. The backward part of the notch right down here is now much lower down, so you can actually put the drop into the bucket without cutting the dot in half with the back part of the rear sight there, which is kind of cool. I would still replace the sights anyway just because I like night sights, but this is a much more user-friendly setup. So it's clearer that the top parts of the front and rear sights are supposed to be the same height without the front sight having the dot float above the bucket, kind of a thing that some people run into. Kind of cool. The ejection pattern on these guns was very consistent. It had a sort of rightward and forward cants to it, and I think they've changed the geometry of the ejector a little bit there to sort of help with that. But this is the Gen 5 Glock 19. We also have a Gen 5 Glock 17, and we're just delighted we've had the early chance to take a look at these pistols, shoot them a little bit, and we're very excited about the changes they've made. It's a very thoughtful upgrade to a classic design.